Hi, this is Professor Scott Norman in the Automotive Lab at Pittsburgh State University, and today we're doing another AC lesson. We have a 2007 Chrysler Minivan with rear air conditioning, and we're going to test the H valve today to make sure that it is opening and closing properly. So we're going to take some CO2 and we are going to spray CO2 on the power dome, and we're going to be able to try to get the H valve to close and see if it's actually working. If you notice right now, my vehicle is cycling air conditioning off and on, and so what I'm going to do to try to stop that from happening, because you can't have the cycle off in the middle of the H valve test, is we're going to open up the doors. We're going to maybe turn on the rear air conditioning to give it a little bit more heat load, and maybe put it on fresh air, because we want our low side pressure to be up as high as we can. Once we do that, we're going to put some CO2 on the power dome, and then we're going to watch our gauges respond, and hopefully they'll be able to close and we're able to watch our pressures drop down. You can see what I have set up on the bench for my CO2 test on the H valve. I got a canister of CO2 that I have in a vise that I have upside down so I can put liquid CO2 on the H valve, helps get it colder. I got a probably at least an 8-foot hose, a welding hose, and then I have a metal wand on the end of it so I could hold it and be able to still get the hose to the power dome. And so that's what I have, so I could actually turn the valve with one hand, hold the wand with the other hand, and then watch my AC gauges to see how much CO2 I have to put on the H valve. So there's my power dome right on the bulkhead in the very back of the engine compartment. So I'm going to take my power wand, I'm going to get down in here, I'm going to put the power wand for my CO2 right about in that position right there, so I can get that power dome and I can spray it with CO2. Okay, so we just did the CO2 test. We sprayed CO2 on the power dome. We were able to watch the H valve close down, and when it closed down, we were able to see the low pressure drop, and also the high pressure dropped a little bit too. So I have a lot of students ask me, why didn't this go down to zero? And so when I do a CO2 test on an H valve, on a good working H valve, I get two results. I get a result very similar to what we saw on this particular vehicle, and then I also see sometimes the low pressure gauge will drop all the way down into a vacuum. And so the difference is that on some TXVs or H valves, that there is a small notch that is cut in the valve itself. So when the valve does close, there's still a little bit of refrigerant flowing through the system to be able to lubricate the compressor. Some compressors are more sensitive to others for lack of lubrication, and of course we'd hate to have a TXV that is stuck closed and cause no refrigerant flow, because that could then damage the compressor. So right now we have the system turned off, and we are looking at our equalization time. So when I test an H valve, not only do I want to do a CO2 test to see if it will close on me, but also I want to see what the normal equalization time on this, to see if it is stuck open, see if there's maybe some type of restrictions in the system. So I started a stopwatch right now on this to try to see what the equalization time is. And so the unique thing on this particular vehicle is that it is a front and rear AC system. And so with the results that I got on my CO2 test, even though I closed the front H valve, I didn't necessarily close the rear one, and so that is another reason why we possibly didn't get it to go all the way down to zero. I'm not so concerned if the low gauge is not dropping all the way down to a zero, to a vacuum. I'm looking for a drop. I'm looking to see that the TXV is not stuck. And so by putting CO2 in the power dome and able to get that gauge to drop down, I'm able to see that, hey, it's not stuck. And I'm looking at my equalization time to see if my equalization times are normal. Normal equalization time on this particular vehicle with front, rear, AC, I'm expecting between 3 to 5 minutes. If it was a front AC system only, in which when I did a CO2 test, I saw the low gauge go all the way down to zero. At that point, I could see equalization time being 10, 20, 30 minutes because, again, there's no little notch cut in the valve to allow a little bit of refrigerant to flow through when the valve is closed down. So right now I got about 3 minutes on my stopwatch, and if you take a look at the gauge readings, I'm gonna come around to the front so I can see them precisely. I'm looking at looks like 65 psi, 66 psi on the low, a little bit above 70 psi on the high, and so I'm looking at around 3 minutes and 15 seconds until this is equalized out. So again, I'm thinking maybe another minute or something like that in order to see full equalization. I don't necessarily need to sit here and watch it equalize fully. I can see that it's changing. I can see that it's moving. So the key is that it is not a restriction in the system. If there was a restriction in the system somewhere, I would expect to see this system to equalize much longer. We're talking half an hour, 2 hours. I've seen it that long itself. Another thing you could do too is that if you think the TXV is stuck, and you take that TXV out, because obviously you have to replace it at some point in time. What I like to do is I like to take my TXV valve, and of course the power dome is on top, so your valve is on the bottom, and I'll end up blowing through them. So it's just a little bit of air goes through this. So you can see that right now this valve is closed and just a little bit is flowing through there. And so we're seeing that equalization right now on the gauge through the valve side, through the liquid line side of the H valve. If I take a look at this valve right here, which I don't know where I got it from, but there is no flow whatsoever. So this valve is fully closed, this valve is restricted. If I put this on and this valve physically cannot move up and down, and if I started up my system, I would see my low pressure gauge go all the way down to a vacuum, and my high side gauge would actually drop down also, below 150. So it would seem like it's a low charge. So a lot of times when TXV is stuck closed or there's a restriction in the system past the receiver dryer, people think it's a low charge, so they'll recover the refrigerant. They'll say, oh wow, it's normal. So at the next point in time, you're going to want to take a look at maybe a restriction in the TXV. This is Scott Norman from Pittsburgh State University, and if you're looking for more lessons on automotive, please visit my Professor Pintane YouTube channel. You can also follow me on Facebook. Just look for Professor Pintane. Thank you very much. You guys have a good day.